The bulldozer blade hit that fence so hard that pieces of wood flew 30 feet into the air. I heard the crowd gasp behind me. I heard someone screaming my name. But I did not stop. I did not even slow down. For minutes. That is all it took to turn $15,000 worth of illegally built fence into a pile of broken lumber sitting on my own property. And the woman who built it, the most feared HOA president in the entire history of Birchwood Estates, was standing at the edge of her driveway in her silk bathrobe, watching everything she had threatened me with collapse into sawdust. Right there on a Tuesday morning, in front of 40 neighbors, 2 police officers, and 1 very expensive attorney, I got every single inch of my land back. But before I tell you how I ended up behind the controls of that bulldozer, you need to understand what this woman did to me. Because this was not just about a fence. This was about a woman who believed she owned this entire neighborhood. And I was the one person who refused to let her get away with it. My name is Ray Coleman. I am 51 years old, and I have lived in Birchwood Estates for 14 years. I moved here with my wife Karen and our 2 kids right after I retired from the fire department. We were not rich people. We were careful people. We saved for 12 years to buy that house and that land. And every square foot of our 0.4-acre property meant something to us. The big oak tree in the backyard. The stone pathway Karen and I laid ourselves one summer weekend. The left side boundary where I had built a small vegetable garden that my daughter used to call Dad's Jungle. Every inch had a memory attached to it. For most of those 14 years, Birchwood Estates was a peaceful place. Decent neighbors. Nothing too dramatic. Then, 3 years ago, Sandra Melville was elected HOA president. And everything changed overnight. Sandra was a 58-year-old retired corporate lawyer who had moved into the neighborhood 5 years earlier. She wore pressed blazers to casual block parties. She referred to herself in the third person during HOA meetings. She had a habit of walking the neighborhood with a clipboard, writing down violations with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Within 6 months of becoming president, she had issued more fines than the previous 4 presidents combined. She fined wins for their wind chimes. She fined Mr. Dobbs for having a basketball hoop visible from the street. She fined a single mother named Carla for parking her work van in her own driveway because it, quote, projected a commercial atmosphere inconsistent with Birchwood's residential aesthetic. But with me, Sandra had a different kind of problem because I pushed back every single time, and she hated that more than anything in the world. It started 18 months ago on a Wednesday afternoon in October. I came home from my grandson's soccer game to find Sandra standing on my left property boundary with 2 men I had never seen before. They were holding wooden stakes and a roll of orange string. I parked my truck and walked over slowly, already feeling something cold move through my chest. Sandra, I said, what exactly is happening on my property? She turned around with that tight smile she always wore when she was about to deliver bad news to someone else. Ray, I'm having the boundary assessed. The HOA is planning a perimeter beautification project, and this section needs a privacy fence for aesthetic consistency. I looked at the 2 men with the stakes. Then I looked back at her. You're standing on my land right now. You do not have permission to assess, measure, or touch anything on my property without my written consent. She clicked her pen twice, her little power move, and said, as HOA president, I have the authority to ensure neighborhood standards are maintained. You signed the HOA agreement, Ray. I suggest you reread section 7, paragraph 4. Then she turned her back to me and kept talking to the men like I was not standing there. I went inside and called my attorney that same evening. 3 weeks later, I came home from a weekend trip visiting my son in Portland to find a brand new 6-foot cedar privacy fence running the entire length of my left property boundary. It was beautiful work, I will admit that. Solid posts, clean white paint, professional installation. Sandra had clearly spent serious money on it. I also noticed immediately that my vegetable garden was gone. Every raised bed, every tomato cage, every cucumber vine my daughter and I had planted together last spring. Gone, ripped out, and replaced with concrete post footings. I got my survey documents from the filing cabinet and went outside with a 100-foot measuring tape. My stomach dropped before I finished the first measurement. The fence was not on the HOA common area. It was not on the boundary line. It was sitting fully and completely on my private property, between 11 and 16 inches inside my legal property line along its entire 160-foot length. Sandra had not built a neighborhood fence. She had seized a strip of my land, destroyed my garden, and dressed it up in white paint and called it a beautification project. I stood there in the cold October air for a long time. Then I went inside and called my attorney again. This time I told her to clear her schedule. My attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Wells, reviewed everything within 48 hours. The survey documents, the HOA agreement, the photos I had taken, and the measurements I had recorded. Her conclusion was simple and direct. The fence was an illegal encroachment. Sandra had no authority under the HOA agreement or any local ordinance to install a permanent structure on private property without owner consent. Patricia sent a formal cease and desist letter to Sandra and the full HOA board the following Monday, demanding the fence be removed within 30 days at the HOA's expense. Sandra's response came 4 days later through her personal attorney. It was 12 pages long and argued that the HOA beautification clause in Section 7 gave her implicit authority over boundary aesthetics. It also contained a personal note at the end that Patricia read to me over the phone with barely concealed amusement. The note said, Mr. Coleman should consider whether continued legal aggression against volunteer community leadership is the image he wishes to project in Birchwood Estates. I told Patricia to send a second letter. This one included a certified copy of the county survey, a formal trespass notice, and a clear statement that if the fence was not removed within the next 21 days, I would remove it myself and pursue full legal damages, including the cost of removal, destruction of property, and restoration of my garden. Sandra did not respond. She did not remove the fence. She did not even acknowledge the second letter. On day 22, I call Henderson Equipment Rental and reserve their compact track bulldozer for a half day. $450. I also hired a 3-man crew for debris removal and called Patricia to make sure every legal box was checked. Patricia advised me to notify the local police non-emergency line in advance, so there would be no confusion when the machinery arrived. I did exactly that. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, because I was ready. At 7:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, the equipment truck turned onto Birchwood Lane. I watched from my porch as it rolled slowly down the street, and I saw curtains moving in windows all the way down the block. By the time the operator helped me into the cab and gave me the basic controls rundown, there were at least 15 neighbors standing on the sidewalk. By the time I started the engine, that number had doubled. Sandra appeared at her front door in a silk bathrobe. She froze for exactly 2 seconds when she saw me in the cab. Then she sprinted across her lawn screaming, "Ray Coleman, you stop this right now. I will have you arrested. This is criminal destruction of HOA property. I am calling 911 this second." I leaned out of the cab and held up the folder Patricia had prepared. Legal survey, trespass notices, certified mail receipts, police notification confirmation, everything. "Go ahead and call Sandra," I said. "Ask them to read the documents first." Then I put my safety glasses on and pushed the blade forward. The first section of fence exploded outward like it had been waiting years for this moment. Posts snapped. Planks splintered. The sound was incredible. A deep crack followed by the groan of wood giving up. The crowd on the sidewalk went completely silent for 1 second, and then someone started clapping. Within moments, half the sidewalk was clapping. 2 police officers arrived in under 10 minutes. I shut down the engine immediately and handed them Patricia's full legal packet. They stepped away, made calls, consulted with each other for nearly 8 minutes. Then the senior officer walked back to where Sandra was standing with her personal attorney, who had apparently arrived in record time. "Ma'am," the officer said, "the property owner has provided a certified survey showing this structure sits on his legal property. He followed proper written notice procedure. We cannot stop him from removing an encroachment from his own land. If you believe you have a civil claim, that is a matter for the courts." Sandra stared at the officer like he had spoken to her in a foreign language. I restarted the bulldozer. By 10:15 a.m., every post was out of the ground. Every plank was in a debris pile on the HOA common strip across the street. Not on my land, not on Sandra's land, exactly where Patricia had advised me to stack it so Sandra would have to arrange its removal herself. When the last piece of fence hit the pile, I climbed down from the cab and walked my property line from one end to the other. The ground was torn up. The garden was still gone. But the land was mine again, completely and visibly mine, with open sky above it and no white paint blocking the view. Patricia filed suit the following week. The court awarded me $4,200 for garden destruction and soil restoration, $450 for bulldozer rental, $300 for labor, and $1,800 in legal fees, a total of $6,750 paid directly by the HOA. The HOA board held an emergency session 2 weeks after the judgment. Sandra resigned before the vote could be taken, which most people in the neighborhood agreed was the smartest decision she had made in 3 years. The Birchwood Bulldozer video, shot by 4 different neighbors on the morning of the removal, was shared over 11,000 times in local community groups within a week. Sandra moved out of Birchwood Estates 4 months later. This spring, I rebuilt my vegetable garden. Bigger than before. New raised beds, new soil, new seeds. My daughter came down for a weekend, and we planted everything together, just like we used to. Standing there with dirt on my hands and the sun on my face, and not a single fence post blocking my view, I thought about what it actually cost to stand your ground. A few months of stress. Some legal fees. A $450 bulldozer rental. Completely worth it. If Sandra Melville taught me one thing, it is this. A bully with a title is still just a bully.
Thanks
And
for
bullies
watching.
only understand.
Subscribe now for daily stories.